There are two special right triangles. The first special right triangle is a 45-45-90 triangle. Two of the angles will be 45 degrees and one of the angles will be 90 degrees. Well, since both of these angles are 45 degrees, this triangle is going to be isosceles, which means that both of these sides will be the same length. These two legs will be the same. The hypotenuse in a 45-45-90 triangle is bigger than both legs. It's not quite twice as big, but it's more than 1 times as big. It's exactly the square root of 2 times bigger. In a 30-60-90 triangle, we have 3 different angles, which means that each side length is a different length. Across from the 30-degree angle will be our smallest side. Everything in a 30-60-90 triangle is based off the smallest side. So I'm going to label the smallest side x. The hypotenuse is going to be bigger than the smallest side. Well, it turns out that in a 30-60-90 it is exactly twice as big. And across from the 60-degree angle will be my middle side. So I have my smallest side and my biggest side, and then finally my middle side. So it's going to be bigger than my shortest side, but smaller than my longest side. It has to be right in between these two values. So it's going to be bigger than x, so I'm going to multiply, but I have to multiply by a number smaller than 2. Well, it turns out that that number smaller than 2 is the square root of 3. So these are the two formulas that you're going to have to memorize for this section. Let's take a look at 2 examples dealing with the 45-45-90 triangle. This picture, I can identify my right angle, and across from my right angle is my hypotenuse. And I can see my two 45-degree angles, and I can identify which sides are going to be congruent. So if this length is 3, that means that m is going to also be 3. And my hypotenuse is going to be longer than both of these two sides. How much longer? Well, if I know that this side is 3 and this side is 3, my hypotenuse is going to be 3 square roots of 2. My x value in example number 1 is 3, so anytime that I see x, I can replace that with 3. In my second example, my triangle isn't quite drawn to scale. So I'm going to redraw it and orient it so it looks like my equation. I have my 90-degree angle and my 45-degree angle and my 45-degree angle. And across from my hypotenuse, or across from my right angle is my hypotenuse, in this case 5 square roots of 2. And across from my 45-degree angle is m. And across from my other 45-degree angle is n, which means that these two sides will be the same. And in this problem, I know the hypotenuse. So if I look at my formula, my hypotenuse is 5 square roots of 2. So 5 is taking the place of x, which means that my side length is going to be 5, and this side length is going to be 5. So in my second example, I know the hypotenuse, it's 5 square roots of 2. My two legs will just be the value, the coefficient in front of the square root of 2. Example 3 is not oriented like my formula. In a 30-60-90 triangle, you're going to always want to redraw the triangle so it looks like your example. It will just make your life a little bit easier. My 30-degree angle will be here and my 60-degree angle will be here, so I look like my formula. And across from my hypotenuse, or my right angle, is my hypotenuse, n. Across from my smallest angle, 30 degrees, will be my smallest side, 13. And across from my 60-degree angle will be m. So if I look at this example, I know my shortest side. I know my x value. X in example 3 is 13. So if I want to go from the smallest side to the biggest side, I'm going to double. So to go from this side to my hypotenuse, I'm going to double 13. So n, in this example, is going to be 13 times 2. And 13 times 2 is 26. Now, to figure out m, I know my smallest side, and to get to my middle side, I'm going to have to get bigger. How much bigger? Well, it's going to be 13 times the square root of 3. So to do example number 3, 13 is taking the place of x. So I have 13 and 26 and 13 square roots of 3. Let's look at the last example, example 4. My triangle is not drawn to scale and it's not oriented correctly. So before I do anything, I'm going to redraw my triangle. Across from my right angle is my hypotenuse, 22. Across from my 30-degree angle, my smallest side will be m, and across from my 60-degree angle, my middle side will be n. So in this case, I know my hypotenuse. I know my biggest side is 22. So if this side is 22, that means that x has to be 11. So to go from my hypotenuse to my shortest side m, I need to take 22 and divide by 2. Now that I know my shortest side, to get to my middle side, I need to take my shortest side and multiply by the square root of 3. So in example 4, I had to first figure out x. To figure out x, I'm going to take my hypotenuse and divide by 2. And then follow the pattern to go from the smallest side to the middle side.